Hello, my name is Jennifer Houtz. I'm one of the counselors with the Ascension Wisconsin Employee Assistance Program. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about being a leader and also hopefully some tips that can help you with some of the struggles that you might be having with your associates and how to make a more positive and effective workplace. Today I'm going to talk quickly about managing stress, mental health in general, how to be a team player, motivating our associates, being respectful in the workplace, promoting positive attitudes, diffusing drama, handling conflict, and where you can get more help. Again, I'm only going to have a very brief amount of time to cover some of these topics, and they're directed mostly to you as a leader, but obviously there's a lot of things that you're going to want to share with your associates. Do you overreact? Sometimes our associates overreact. They have big emotions related to things that go on in the workplace. Trying to help associates to realize that sometimes our emotions run away with us, and sometimes we have feelings and thoughts behind our reactions, like that things aren't fair or that somehow we've been slighted or discounted. And being able to take a moment to step back and de escalate ourselves can help tremendously. So, taking a small time out, and this can be something that an associate would decide to do for themselves, or it might be something that you as a leader might gently suggest. But even just a few minutes to step away, to take some time to regroup themselves, think about maybe what they would like to say, decide if it's really a big deal. All of that can happen in a very short amount of time if we can just step away for a minute and take a breath. And maybe you as a leader need to hear that too before you respond to your associates. Step away, take a breath. Some things that you could possibly say is, let me just get back to you. Perhaps you're someone that needs to process for a minute and then decide what you want to say. Or you can acknowledge that your associate is very upset, or a customer, and you can say, come over here, let's talk about this. So sometimes separating that person from being right in the middle of public or being in front of other coworkers, being able to step back for a minute, or saying, why don't you just sit here for a minute and I'll come back and we're going to talk this through. It's very important that we understand boundaries. Sometimes we have to use some of our assertive skills and be able to say no. Sometimes people are overstressed and overreacting because they don't manage boundaries very well. Sometimes they are afraid to say no because they think they're going to get in trouble. Sometimes they're afraid to say no because they feel like it's damaging relationships with other associates. Sometimes they might even feel that way because they think they're going to lose a job. Helping your associates to say no. So, for example, not committing to something that they can't do and then later having a bad attitude about it or backing out. And also for you as a leader, that sometimes you have to set some limits on your own availability and also not taking on more responsibility than you can reasonably handle. When we are able to say no, it helps our yeses be better yeses. So sometimes we can't completely do what someone else asks us, but we can offer something. So something of a compromise. So perhaps you're discussing a schedule with an associate and they can't work all of the days that you're asking them. However, they can do this. So having that collaborative attitude and conversation of, okay, this is what I can do, and especially as a leader, this is what's in my authority. This is what I think would be fair. According to our policy, this is what I can do. And saving the yeses for when you really can follow through on those agreements. It's beneficial to remind ourselves as leaders and also to teach our associates about the difference between work life and personal life. There's a lot of differences in the relationships that happen in those two settings. In professional relationships like we have at work, we're in a time and place where we're paid to be there. And part of that has associated responsibilities that are expected of us. Our purpose in being there is to serve the customer and to represent the Schierl company. The purpose is also time limited. So while we're working, that's the relationship that we need to focus on. But when we're not at work, we don't necessarily need to be focused on those work relationships. And obviously, when either Team Schierl or an associate terminates employment, then it's no longer valid to have those relationships. Whereas personal relationships take place in a non-paid setting. So obviously this is voluntary and it's determined by both people. So there's not set shifts, there's not rigid expectations about how long you're going to engage with this person. It's not based on responsibilities or what both people are required to do in a relationship. And the whole point, obviously, is it's completely voluntary and it's for the enjoyment of both of them. It's focused on shared interests and activities. And obviously, it's time unlimited. People can have personal relationships for as long as both of them determine that they would like that. This is an important distinction to make sometimes in the workplace when these sort of bleed together. So talking to your associates about the kind of relationships that they can have at work, and what would be helpful. Often we don't have to like everyone that we work with, but we can still be respectful and we can still work together. Also, it's probably better to keep romantic relationships out of the workplace because it causes a lot of issues. Also, personal relationships should not be happening on work time. So having a boyfriend or girlfriend coming to meet us while we're on shift is not okay. And also being careful about the things, for example, that we post on social media, or if we decide to have a personal relationship with someone from work, that there is a time and a place for certain discussions and activities. Work time is for work. Personal time has a lot more leeway. Also, it's important to talk to associates about the mode of communication that happens in the workplace versus personally. This is something you have to determine as a leader, what is appropriate for you. If you are okay being texted on your personal phone from your employees, then you should be able to set up some parameters around that. Like how and what can they communicate with you and when? Are you okay receiving text in the middle of the night? Are you okay learning that an employee is not going to come for their shift um, via text? Or would you prefer that that comes in on a phone to the office and is recorded on a voicemail? Would you prefer to have an email? What are the different ways that your employee should talk to you? And in reverse, what are the ways that you talk to an employee? So obviously, if you have concerns, for example, about an associate's performance, that's not appropriate to go in text. So realize the time and the place for different kinds of communication in your workplace, and it will hopefully reduce a lot of confusion and also a lot of hurt feelings and frustrations. Mental illness is very prevalent in our community, and unfortunately, sometimes an associate is struggling with mental health. And this comes into play in our role as leaders sometimes, even when we don't want it to. If you're concerned about an associate, realize that they don't have to inform you about anything personal in their medical situation, including their mental health. But there are things that you might want to look out for that are maybe related to mental health that are in your purview because they're affecting employment, for example, like having difficulty concentrating or getting in conflict, being inappropriate with customers, or perhaps showing up to work in inappropriate attire or poor hygiene. If you think an associate has some issues, it's best to meet with them privately, but to talk about it from a work aspect, not from a diagnostic aspect, not to say things like, wow, I think you're really depressed, or things that are really not your authority to determine and really is a private issue. But you can talk about the things, as I just mentioned. I've been noticing that you've been kind of short when you're talking with a customer, or that you roll your eyes, or you seem to be angry whenever I try to talk to you. Be careful, though, to not just assume that you know what's going on or what the cause is. Sometimes we tend to think that we know and we understand what's going on with an employee, and it actually sends us all down the wrong road. So, some things that you might say to your associate is, I've noticed that your appearance is, declining. Like it's not really what we would expect in our workplace. Or um, help me understand. Now, when I told you about the new schedule, you seemed to get really upset about this. Can you help me understand why that was upsetting to you? If an employee is complaining to you or saying something that seems sort of unusual, you can reflect back what you heard. So, what I hear you saying is this. And obviously, if you have serious concerns about a person's safety, to be able to check in with them about, really, are you okay? What's going on with you? Are you safe to be at work right now? The most important thing that we can do for our associates is to just acknowledge their feelings. A lot of times, people don't need you to fix their problems. They just want to know that you're listening to them and that you understand. Sometimes that diffuses a lot of things if we just feel heard. If they want to talk openly, take the lead and help them to get to a private space to talk about it. If they seem to be wanting to bring a lot of those personal conversations into the workplace, then we go back to that boundary discussion about when that's appropriate and when it's not, and maybe a better place when those conversations could happen. And recognize that obviously you're not a counselor, but you can show compassion for them, and you could suggest that there are resources available. The biggest thing is to respect employee privacy no matter what is going on. If they're talking to you about a health diagnosis, about a relationship issue in their personal life, if they are talking about that they have mental health concerns, be very careful and listen. Don't ask a lot of really personal questions. They don't have to disclose any of that to you, and they may not want to. But if it is causing problems in the workplace, that takes a whole different direction. But if you have that help me understand attitude, it's going to take you a long way. Be very careful to not preach, to not tell them what you think they should do about their personal issues, and try to be very encouraging and supportive in the workplace that they're managing it on their own and being able to do work as well. If you ever have an associate, though, who is making concerning jokes, or saying odd things about maybe you won't see me at work again, or I don't know, it won't matter after tonight, things like that. Or even if people are making lighthearted comments like, um, I about thought I had to end it all, or she had to talk me off the ledge. Some of those things that we say, sometimes we have to be careful. First of all, if they're said in jest, doesn't mean that there isn't a grain of truth behind it. And second, it can be offensive to other people. There are many people that have been affected by suicide, and those kind of comments can be very triggering. They can also be very harmful and offensive. If you have an employee who is in crisis and you think they're at risk of harming themselves or anyone else, do not hesitate to call 911 and get help. If you need to, you can take them to an emergency room. You can also call your county's crisis line or the 988 mental health helpline. The most important thing is to remain calm and don't leave them. Stay with them until another professional is able to help them and to take responsibility. and to the best of your ability, protect their privacy. So, for example, if you have an associate who suddenly bursts into tears in the, at the register, to take them to the back room, give them some privacy so that they can get the help that they need, but that they don't have to be embarrassed or, in an awkward position any more than they have to be. So just a reminder again that it is a protected mental health um, situation when you don't have to disclose. So an associate may never tell you that they have a medical or a mental health condition going on, and that's their right. Um, it's also possible that you could be offering help and suggesting, for example, that they would use their associate assistance program, that they would go to the doctor, or that maybe they need to take off some time from work. But again, it's their right to say, no, I don't want to. The only time that really your leadership role comes into play is if performance is being affected, and recognizing that if they have not asked for time off, there hasn't been a request for an accommodation, then a disciplinary action may be appropriate. Try to address all of those issues, medical and mental health, as a job-related problem. So looking at, how that's affecting the workplace, how it's affecting their ability to do their job, please offer them the associate assistance program. Assure them that it is confidential. There's a lot of things that we can offer at that point. I would encourage you as a leader to reach out to our program to help you walk through those steps. Or even if you're having a situation with an associate that is not an emergency, but is very important and you're not sure how to proceed, call the Employee Assistance Program and we'll help you walk through right now, and we'll talk with your associate as needed. One of the biggest things that we want to promote in our workplaces is being a team player. And I had the opportunity to review some of the values that Team Schierl lists on their website. And this might be a great opportunity for you to review these, but also to review them with your team, perhaps at a staff meeting, or perhaps just in little notes around the workplace or in the employee area where they could be reminded. We want our associates to know that they're really the key. They're the cornerstone, and we want to promote them. We want them to have a good work experience. We value them as individuals. We want them to work hard and to provide guests with an exceptional service and experience. That we want all of them to have an opportunity to grow and develop and to be their best self. And we want them to enjoy their job. And then we very much value differences and the individual values of family and quality of life and personal beliefs and all of those things. And really, sometimes the best team cohesion comes from all of us reviewing these things as a shared goal. Often there are way more things that we agree on that we all want, way more than things that we disagree on or that are causing problems. So if you are struggling with some of that team morale, or getting your team to cooperate, sometimes returning to the shared values is a great place to start. It's also important to check our expectations for us as leaders and also for associates. Checking, what do you expect from the situation? What do you expect from this individual? Often we get frustrated by things that happen pretty regularly. So, for example, if you get frustrated every time that you have to drive and the traffic really upsets you, or other drivers really frustrate you or disappoint you, my question would be to you, how many times have you driven and this has been the case? A lot of times it's, well, almost every day. Well, then we need to check our expectations. Our expectations are too high, that people are going to be amazing drivers, and that they're always going to be polite, and they're not going to make mistakes, and that we're always going to hit the green lights, and that we're going to get there on time, or we're even going to be early. Sometimes we have to lower those expectations, or we have to change them to realize that often there are going to be frustrations, and that doesn't have to indicate that we have to be frustrated or that it has to ruin our day sometimes. Also, especially in the workplace, when we have expectations, we have to make sure we're communicating them. So if you're expecting your associates to behave in a certain way or not, make sure you've been telling them about that they know what the expectations are, and be consistent in your follow through. Also, don't expect your associates to be perfect, and don't expect yourself to be perfect. Sometimes we're very hard on ourselves, and we think that we always need to be on our A game and we have to do everything perfectly. And that just isn't realistic. So, beating ourselves up about, oh, I forgot about that, or I just didn't do that as well as I wanted to. Being able to check our expectations that we as leaders are also human, and there are times we're going to be amazing, and there are times we're just going to be getting by. It's important that as a team, we have realistic expectations, and particularly that we learn to accept each other as having lots of strengths, but also some challenges, and that we learn to let things go, and that we're not holding on to things that have happened in past days or past weeks, but trying to see each new situation as a fresh opportunity. It's important to remember that sometimes people have things going on that we don't necessarily know about. And often when people are struggling, when they're hurting in their own personal life, it's because there's something going on that's hurting them. And that perspective sometimes can give us that pause or that moment to try to approach it a little bit differently rather than barking back at them or being so offended. About 90% of the time, it ain't about you. Now, don't misunderstand me. That's still not okay for your associate or your fellow leader to be shouting at someone or to ignore someone or to have inappropriate behavior in the workplace. But it does help us to have a little bit of compassion and to maybe approach situations a little bit differently. And as I mentioned, to not take them too personally, because sometimes it feels like others' behavior are really directed towards us, and it really has nothing to do with us. I encourage employees to think about everyone as having an invisible backpack. This is a backpack that we all carry that is full of stressors and worries and a history of things that might be bothering us, um, home life things, maybe health, maybe mental health, all things that we're dealing with in addition to whatever's going on at work. So taking everything with a grain of salt. So, we can't always be happy and positive every day. And there are going to be times where someone might be quiet, or they might even seem a little bit down, or they might seem a little oversensitive. And again, it's more likely about what's going on in their personal life really than what it is in the workplace. So try to give them a little bit of a benefit of a doubt. It's important for us to take the high road and look for the good. If you want to look for the negative in your workplace or in your associates, you will find them for sure. On the other hand, if you want to look for the positive in people and in the whole team at work, you can also find those. And we get a lot further by looking for that and encouraging that when we see them. It's important that we talk with our associates about sexual harassment and other situations that are really not respectful. And if you haven't had that discussion lately, it's good to review what things are appropriate and what aren't. Sometimes people don't realize that, for example, some of the jokes or things that they might insinuate or comments are not appropriate, and they might not know that they're actually being offensive to someone else. They also might not know that it doesn't have to be something you say, but it could be something suggestive that you do, or even a way that you look or a way that you dress that could be inappropriate. And of course, with inappropriate touching. All of these help us to protect our employees by reviewing what those good boundaries are and what the expectations are. I'm going to talk now about maybe a couple of challenges that you have with some of your associates. Just a few ideas about how you can maybe motivate that associate that seems to be struggling a little bit. We're all motivated by an opportunity to hear an attaboy or attagirl and know that we have been doing our job well. You want to try to catch people doing things well and giving them the opportunity to demonstrate their strengths. If you have an associate that's really good at something or really likes to do something, give them the opportunity to do that and praise them publicly for it and tell them thank you when they do a good job. Make sure you include all of your employees when you're working on, for example, goals for your particular site, or maybe an initiative that you're taking this month with your employees. Make sure that they're all part of that, that it's something that they value as well. Make sure that we have respectful relationships so that everybody feels important no matter what role they play. Think about your performance review process. A lot of people really need to hear that constructive feedback, both good and challenging feedback. If you are a leader who kind of shies away from doing performance reviews, or you personally hate doing them and so you put them off, realize that there are a lot of associates that really like them and really want to hear that feedback. And maybe when they can hear the things that they're doing well and set some personal goals around work behavior, you might see a real change in their willingness to comply with that. We have to reframe sometimes some of the behaviors that are happening when we're acting unmotivated. Sometimes people don't realize things like, if you're here and I'm paying you and you're not working, or you're doing things that are damaging to our property, you're maybe not being completely honest with your time card, things like that, those are stealing, and obviously not helpful to our workplace. And a reminder that there is always a choice to be part of the Schierl team or not. And to not say that in a threatening way, but to remind people that if they really are not a good fit, if they really just don't think that this is something for them, that there are many other jobs in the community, and we don't hold grudges against that. Sometimes people have to try things out to know that. It's important in our workplace that we respect differences, which means that we just acknowledge that everybody has a value just because they're here, just because they're an individual, and that they deserve to be treated like that. They deserve to have an opportunity to be their own self, to have their own opinions, that they can be different and yet still very valuable, and that we want to admire them for their unique abilities and the qualities that they can bring to the workplace. A conversation that you might have with your associates is, how do we show respect in our workplace? And maybe that's something that you can even encourage employees to put, for example, like on a bulletin board that would be shared by everyone. They could put a Post-it note up about, I feel respected here when, kind of things, or specific actions that they think is showing respect to other people. This is a great opportunity to realize that people see respect in different ways, and things that you might not have even thought were disrespectful might be. And if you think that, well, maybe we really aren't disrespectful at work, or we really don't have a problem with that, or if you think your associates think that, I would really challenge you to think about some of these ways that people might be disrespectful at work. For example, having demeaning comments about other associates, not giving credit when it was actually someone else's idea or effort. As I mentioned, some of the offensive jokes, not treating other people's property with respect, gossiping and talking about people behind their back, complaining to others instead of talking to the person that you're upset with, being disruptive and interrupting when other people are speaking, particularly leaders, insulting or embarrassing others, even if we say that it's just joking around or trying to be lighthearted, being rude, just not having good manners in general, stereotyping people or treating them differently because they're in a certain group, using threatening words or body language, in general being negative and refusing to try, criticizing others who are trying or who are excited and enthusiastic in the workplace, speaking loudly or being on personal calls during work time. all of these are examples of places and times when we might not be very respectful in the workplace. And it's a good reminder for us as leaders, but also for all of our associates. Also to realize that some things can be offensive and not necessarily be against the rules. So a lot of the things that I mentioned, like rumors or undermining work or not giving people the credit that they should have, or making jokes, or pestering people, or being sarcastic and overly critical, um, tampering with their personal belongings, even if it's in fun. All of these are examples of bullying and definitely of disrespect that maybe you don't perceive them that way, but it really is about how the individual perceives it. If they feel like they're being singled out, if they feel like it's mean-hearted or disrespectful, then it is. Unfortunately, none of these things are illegal, and so a lot of these things get into sort of a gray area. So it comes back to that education of associates. So we really want to build a team atmosphere where we're pro people. And it's not so much about what we can get away with or making sure we avoid illegal things, but that we want to be a positive workplace. Just a reminder, though, that if we get into a situation where an individual is being targeted because they're part of a protected class, if it has anything to do with disrespecting someone in a sexual nature, any kind of conduct that is unwelcome to the individual, or anything that creates an environment where people feel intimidated or they're deeply offended or that they feel like people are angry and hostile toward them. And remember, that doesn't always have to be the direct target of any bullying. So, for example, if one individual is being put down or made fun of, other people that witness that can also find that the workplace could be intimidating and offensive. What do we do about those associates who have really negative attitudes? How do we address that? Try to be as proactive as you can. Try to nip that in the bud and get ahead of it as soon as you can to affect positive morale and people working hard. It has a contagion effect both ways. If you can get the ball rolling in the right direction, that we're going to be positive and working hard, that will gain momentum. On the other hand, if you've got people who are doing less than they should, if they start to have a negative attitude, if they become sarcastic, if they just don't want to try, that also can build momentum. So getting ahead of it as soon as you can. Being specific in your examples, so obviously in a private setting, but to talk to that associate about when you said this or when you do this, this is not a helpful attitude and it's affecting the team. And this is how, and this is what I expect for you to do different, and to be very specific about that. Um, Agree on an action plan together. So again, you want the associate to be part of the solution. So maybe there's something going on why they are being negative or less than enthusiastic. So, is there some underlying issue that we can take care of? And if so, how can we move forward then? But if you're not seeing progress, this may be a cause for discipline. And then you have sort of, set your groundwork that we've already reviewed this. Probably the most important thing, though, is to reinforce those positive associates and really promote a corporate culture with your example. So you're being positive, you're being efficient, you're having good enthusiasm when you come to work as a leader is really going to rub off on your associates. Trying to shut down workplace drama can be really challenging. Couple of tips for this. Try to model the behavior you want to see. And that's a hard one for us to swallow, but sometimes we as leaders, we get caught up in the drama too. Sometimes it is sort of interesting to hear the gossip about associates. Sometimes we even share things that we probably shouldn't, or we share things about our personal life that we probably shouldn't. So make sure that you're modeling those good professional boundaries that I mentioned earlier and that you're not inciting the drama. Make sure that you've got a system for managing conflict. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Try to be as honest and transparent as possible. So saying, "Oh, I messed up on that," or "It seems like this has been going on and this is something that we really want to work on." So letting employees know that this is an intentional change is trying to reduce this drama. Obviously, you just stop repeating gossip. Be direct and open in your team meetings to say, this is not appropriate and this is something that we're really working on and we're going to stop having happen in our workplace. So don't beat around the bush or think that people are going to get the hint. Make sure that you're very direct. And try to understand the motivation. So is this someone who's really trying to fit in? Is this someone who's feeling like they're not heard, or they're frustrated and they're not handling it in the right way? So that goes back to some of that good communication and listening, that maybe we need to get to the bottom of why this is happening, and then being direct with those associates about what is expected. Reminder to you and to all your associates that the communication that happens is way more than just what we say. So if you have eye rolling that's going on, or refusal to make eye contact, or walking away while someone's talking to you, um, someone who doesn't respond when you place a phone call to them or when you text them, other ways that we might um, text or leave messages to associates that could be misinterpreted. So being very careful about tone. And if we're not sure how someone's going to take it, that maybe it's something we should talk about in person. So for example, not leaving a big sign on, "Don't leave a big mess in the microwave," without actually having a conversation with people about what the expectation is and what the concerns are. Sometimes we lean on, lots of nonverbal ways because we don't really want to address it directly, and often that doesn't go well. And finally, what do we do about conflicts? What if we have associates who just don't seem to get along, or an associate that just doesn't get along with you as the leader? And recognizing that there's lots of opportunities that come in conflict. Some of us are very, what we call conflict avoidant, and we really prefer to not have any. And we're generally the peacemakers, and that's a great strength of ours. But sometimes it also helps us to avoid doing some of those conversations that we need to have. For example, to hold some people accountable and to see, is there some way that we can get better? What is it that we need to do? How do we need to improve? Are the goals that we need to set? We mentioned early on that emotions sometimes and overreacting sometimes get away from people, and they may or may not have good skills on how to manage that. So if you're seeing that you have an associate who is often having big emotions and sometimes maybe not in the most appropriate places, that you can try to teach them about that, and those timeout opportunities to step away and then come back. Realize that they maybe have had other situations where they have tried to handle this in a different way that didn't go well, whether that is in the workplace or maybe in their personal life. So we might have to address some of that. Sometimes they're very much beating up on themselves. So I mentioned those expectations that we have. Are they expecting that they're always going to be perfect, or do they think that other people expect them to be perfect? And so when there's the slightest criticism or question of what they were doing, do they get really defensive, and do they think that this is actually some sort of comment on their worth, or on the value of their input, and it's really not about that? Sometimes it just comes back to those manners, as I mentioned, are nonverbals and also tone. So if you're going to be texting people, realize that there's often opportunities where things get mixed up and people might misread your tone. And then finally, being defensive in general. Is it a person that just is not willing to listen or accept that there's a possibility that they have done something wrong? I would encourage associates to pick their battles. So is it really important? Does it need to be addressed right now because it's about a value system, it's about safety? Then yeah, we need to address it right now. But even so, we can do it in a more private way. We can also always be respectful, even if we need to address it right now. If we need to say something about it, then we say it and we let it go. We don't have to keep hammering on it. We don't have to keep bringing it up or being sarcastic about it. And if it's something that really is not that important, that we could let it go. And ways that you might determine that it's not important is this going to matter, tomorrow, in a week, in a year? Is there really any critical issue here? And if there isn't, then it might be something that you would choose to let go. Try to pick the things that are really important to take on in those conflicts, and to encourage your associates to do that as well. So harkening back to the fact that we don't all have to be best friends. We don't even have to particularly like other people that we work with, but we do need to be respectful, and we do need to be cooperative, again, so that we can serve customers. A little bit of tact goes a long way. So even if there is something that has to be said, it may not need to be said right now, doesn't need to be said in front of other people, certainly not in front of customers. We might need to just take a minute. It might not to be need to be said in this way. Sometimes people feel like honesty is above all else, even if they say something really harsh because they're being honest. It isn't always kind, and it isn't always helpful. Also, sometimes people sugarcoat things, or they kind of beat around the bush and they never really say what they need to say. So the message doesn't get communicated. So we need to look at that and be able to get to the point. If you have something that you need to tell someone, to follow it up with a question so that you can try to understand better. And do they understand what you're saying? Do they understand what the expectation is? Is there something more that they need to tell you that's related to that? And remember that it's always okay to take that time out and step back and say it later, especially if it's super important. Sometimes picking our words and the timing is really, really important. So take a minute and make sure you say it right. Overall, we want to help associates to find that common ground. So going back to those core values at Team Schierl, but also being able to really listen. As a leader, more than anything, our associates just want you to hear them. They want you to at least see where they're coming from, to validate their concerns, to validate their ideas, even if you don't agree with them, even if it's something that we're not going to implement. They have the right to have it. They're an individual. They have things they might want to contribute. They have opinions that are important to them. So being able to listen to that, and then to steer to, all of these things we agree on, even though there are a few things that we don't, and making those compromises of, yes, you are right about this, but I'm right about this, and this is where we're going to move, and letting go. It's more important that we have good teamwork and we have that positive attitude. We don't need to hold an account of all the things that people have done wrong. It really doesn't matter in this situation whose fault it was, as long as we've come to a resolution and we're all moving in the same direction. And finally, I just want to encourage you again, lots of topics that I covered today, hopefully some good reminders for you as a leader, but you don't have to do this all alone. If you are struggling as a leader and you would like to talk with one of our counselors to help coach you through a particularly tricky situation, let us help you. Reach out to the Ascension EAP. We are more than happy to talk through some situations with you, some problem solving, some coping. Maybe it's your reactions that you're struggling with. Maybe it's your own um, backpack, as we talked about, that's really affecting your ability as a leader that you would like to talk to someone about. Or perhaps there's an associate that you see is really struggling with some things that are coming into the workplace and are causing issues. Maybe some of those mental health or personal issues that you really don't feel is your role as a leader to talk about, but that definitely you think they would need some of that help. So to refer your associate, and as I mentioned, you can be right there with them, calling our 800 number and saying, I have this individual here with me. They're kind of struggling right now. I wonder if you could tell them a little bit about what your program provides and how you might help us. You can also email us. You can also go to our website and see a lot of resources that we have available. We're here to support you and to make you as successful as possible. Please reach out if there's questions or concerns or things that we can help you out with. Thank you. Have a great day.